Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku had earphone jack quirk but better than Kyoka Jiro. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world did not begin with a bang, nor did it begin with a whimper. For Izuku Midoriya, the world began with a hum. It was a low, persistent vibration that lived in the marrow of his bones, a frequency that never ceased. Most people experience silence as the absence of sound, but for Izuku, silence was a myth. Silence was just the volume turned down on a chaotic, screaming universe. He was 4 years old when the doctor told Inko Midoriya that her son was not normal. Not in the way the quirkless were abnormal, vanishingly rare as they were, but abnormal in the sheer biological density of his mutation. His earlobes, the doctor had said, tapping the X-ray illuminated on the wall. The buzzing of the fluorescent light overhead sounded like a chainsaw to Izuku, causing him to press his small hands over his ears. They've developed prehensile appendages, similar to the darker-haired woman's quirk registry you mentioned, the one in your husband's family? But looking at the bone structure, these aren't just for hearing. Inko looked nervous, her hands twisting her skirt. Is he okay? He cries so much, doctor. Every time we go to the supermarket, he screams. Sensory overload, the doctor noted, scribbling on a clipboard. The scratching of the pen tip against the paper sounded like a knife dragging across a chalkboard to the boy sitting on the exam table. Izuku flinched, tears pricking his eyes. His auditory canals are widened. His eardrums are reinforced with a cartilage-like substance, yet they are hypersensitive. And look here. The doctor pointed to Izuku's wrists. Just beneath the skin, faint circular ports were visible. Secondary jacks, the doctor mused. Rare. Very rare. He's going to be a transmitter as much as a receiver, Mrs. Midoriya. A living amplifier. The diagnosis was clinical, fascinating, and detached. It didn't explain why the world hurt so much. It didn't explain why the sound of a dog barking 3 streets away felt like a physical slap to the face. The incident that defined his childhood happened 3 weeks later. It was a Tuesday. The kindergarten playground was a cacophony of shrieks, laughter, and the thudding of rubber balls against pavement. For Izuku, it was a war zone. He sat by the sandbox, wearing the thick, fluffy earmuffs his mother had bought him. They helped, but they didn't stop the vibrations. He could feel the footsteps of the other children vibrating through the sand, shaking his skeleton. Deku! The voice was sharp, cutting through the muffs. Katsuki Bakugo. Izuku looked up. Even then, Bakugo was a force of nature, loud, brash, and smelling of burnt sugar. He stood over Izuku, his shadow long. Behind him, his 2 lackeys sneered. Why are you wearing those things? It's not even cold. Bakugo shouted. To Izuku, it sounded like a megaphone pressed against his skull. Too loud, Izuku whispered, clutching his knees. The world is too loud, Kaken. Ha! You ignoring me? Bakugo scowled. He didn't understand. Back then, nobody understood. He thought Izuku was mocking him, playing the victim. He reached out, his palms crackling with small, popping explosions. Take them off and listen when I'm talking to you. Bakugo grabbed the earmuffs and yanked. The protection vanished. The world crashed in. The screech of the rusty swing set. The roar of a passing truck on the highway a mile away. The heartbeat of the teacher standing by the door. The rustle of leaves. The shouting. The explosions. Pup, pup, pup. It wasn't sound. It was violence. It was a needle driven into Izuku's brain. The pain was white-hot and immediate. Izuku didn't mean to react. It was instinct pure and primal. His body needed to push the noise away. He needed to create a counter-frequency, a wall to hide behind. Izuku opened his mouth and screamed. But it wasn't a normal scream. From the jacks dangling from his earlobes and the ports on his wrists, the air distorted. A visible ripple of concussive force erupted from his small body. It was a chaotic, omnidirectional blast of pure decibels. Boom! The sandbox exploded. Sand turned into shrapnel, blasting outward in a perfect ring. The windows of the kindergarten building, 30 feet away, shattered inward in a shower of glittering glass. The metal pole of the swing set groaned and bent as if struck by a giant, invisible hammer. Bakugo was thrown backward, tumbling end over end across the grass, his explosions silenced by the sheer magnitude of the sonic wave. Silence followed. For the first time in his life, Izuku heard nothing. Then, the blood began to trickle from his nose and ears, and he collapsed. 10 years later, Aldera Junior High was a study in structural mediocrity. The ventilation system rattled with a loose bearing on the second floor. The third fluorescent bulb in the back of Class 3A buzzed at a frequency of 60 Hz, slightly off-key from the others. The teacher, Mr. Sato, had a slight arrhythmia in his heart that skipped a beat every 45 seconds. Izuku Midoriya heard it all. He sat at his desk, his head encased in a pair of sleek, matte black industrial noise-canceling headphones. They were custom-made, heavily modified by Izuku himself over the years. They didn't just block sound, they actively generated an inverse wave to nullify the ambient noise of the city. Without them, he couldn't function. Without them, the sheer volume of humanity would drive him insane. He tapped a pen against his notebook. Tap. 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 He felt the vibration travel through the desk, down the metal legs, and into the floor. Through the soles of his red sneakers, he could sense the footsteps of the students in the classroom below them. So, the teacher announced, slapping a stack of papers onto the podium. The sound was a dull thud, dampened by Izuku's headphones but still perceptible. You're all third years now. It's time to think seriously about your futures. The class remained silent, but Izuku could hear the shifting of fabric, the rapid heartbeats of nervous students, the scratching of pencils. I could pass out these career aptitude forms, the teacher continued, a smirk evident in his voice, but why bother? I know you all want to go into the hero course, the class erupted. Quirks flashed, extended fingers, minor telekinesis, floating books. Izuku didn't move. He kept his head down, writing in his notebook. Hero analysis for the future number 13. He was sketching the wavelength pattern of present mixed voice, calculating the potential destructive output if focused into a narrow beam rather than a wide cone. Yes, you all have wonderful quirks, the teacher said, waving a hand. But no power usage in school. You know the rules. Hey, teach, the voice cut through the dampeners. It was a voice Izuku knew better than his own. The pitch, the timbre, the arrogant drawl. Katsuki Bakugo reclined in his chair, feet on the desk. Don't lump me in with these extras. They'll be lucky to end up as sidekicks to some D-lister. I'm the real deal. The class shouted in indignation, a wave of incoherent noise. Izuku winced, adjusting the dial on his headset to increase the suppression. Oh, right, the teacher said, checking his list. Bakugo, you're aiming for UA High, aren't you? The murmur turned into gasps of all. UA was the fortress, the peak. That's right, Bakugo said, grinning ferally. I aced the mock exams. I'm the only one here with the stuff to surpass All Might. I'm going to be the top hero, and it starts with me being the only graduate from this dump to make it to UA. Actually, the teacher interrupted, glancing at the list again. Midoriya is also signed up for the UA entrance exam. The room went dead silent. It wasn't the silence of respect. It was the silence of anticipation. Izuku didn't look up. He felt the eyes on him. He felt the shift in air pressure as Bakugo froze. Deku. The growl was low, vibrating through the floorboards. Bakugo's hand slammed onto Izuku's desk. Boom. An explosion. Small, contained, but close. The heat washed over Izuku's face. The force rattled his teeth. You think you can stand in the same ring as me? Bakugo hissed, smoke curling from his palms. You think just because you have that freakishly loud quirk, you're a hero? You're a liability, Deku. You'll blow out everyone's eardrums before you save a single person. Izuku slowly raised his head. His eyes were green, tired, and ringed with dark circles. He reached up and pulled the headphones down around his neck. The world rushed in, the hum of the refrigerator in the teacher's lounge down the hall, the distant siren, the breathing of 30 students. He grimaced, his ear jacks, too long, fleshy tendrils tipping with headphone-like plugs, twitching instinctively as they tasted the air. I'm not competing with you, Kaken, Izuku said softly. His voice was quiet, almost a whisper. He rarely raised his voice. He knew what happened when he did. I'm just going to UA. That's all. Don't give me that apathy crap, Bakugo yelled. You walk around with those things on your ears, blocking out the world, acting like you're too good to listen to us. You think you're better than me? I think, Izuku said, his eyes narrowing slightly, that you're shouting at 85 decibels, and if you go any higher, you're going to trigger a migraine that will make me vomit. Please sit down. The class stifled a laugh. Bakugo's face went red. You little Bakugo, sit down. The teacher barked, finally intervening. Bakugo glared, his red eyes burning into Izuku's. This isn't over. You step into the exam, I'll crush you. I'll make sure you can't hear anything but your own failure. He kicked Izuku's desk hard, before stalking back to his seat. Izuku sighed, sliding his headphones back over his ears. He turned the dial. The world faded back into a manageable hum. Failure, he thought. At least failure is quiet. School ended with the usual chaos. Izuku packed his bag quickly, eager to escape the crush of bodies in the hallway. He needed open air. He needed the route under the bridge where the acoustics were predictable. As he walked, he kept his head on a swivel. His quirk, which he had named Acoustic Overdrive, was more than just sound projection. It was a constant radar. His ear jacks hung low, hovering just inches above his shoulders. Even through the headphones, he could feel the pressure waves of objects moving around him. He didn't need to look to know a cyclist was approaching from behind on the left. The specific whir of the chain, and the displacement of air told him everything. He walked past the shopping district, avoiding the arcade, too many electronic shrieks, and the construction site. Jackhammers were torture. He reached the underpass. It was a dark, curved tunnel that magnified sound. For most, it was creepy. For Izuku, it was comforting. The echo allowed him to map the entire space instantly. Step. Echo. Step. Echo. He stopped. The echo was wrong. His footstep had rebounded off the concrete wall, but the return signal was mushy. Damp. There was something viscous ahead, clinging to the sewer grate. Izuku pulled his headphones down, letting them hang around his neck. He needed full sensory input. Fluid, he whispered. Heavy density. Moving. A gurgling sound erupted from the manhole cover 5 meters in front of him. Green slime exploded outward, forming a towering, grotesque wave of sludge. 2 manic, bulging eyes floated in the muck. A medium-sized skin suit. The villain hissed, his voice wet and distorted. You'll do perfectly, kid. Izuku didn't scream. Screaming was a weapon, and he couldn't use it in a confined space without rupturing his own eardrums. He stepped back, his eyes darting around. Villain. Liquid body mutation. No visible solid mass. Got nowhere to run. The sludge villain roared, lunging forward. The speed was deceptive. The sludge lashed out like a whip. Izuku dodged left, the air pressure warning him a split second before impact. The slime cracked against the concrete wall where his head had been. Don't struggle. The villain expanded, filling the tunnel. I just need to hide inside you for a bit. It'll only hurt for a minute. The slime engulfed Izuku's legs. It was cold and smelled of sewage and rot. It surged up his torso, wrapping around his chest, aiming for his mouth and nose. Panic flared. The sensation of the slime entering his ears was agonizing, like waterboarding, but thicker. Can't breathe. Can't hear. Izuku clawed at the fluid, but his fingers passed right through. Physical strikes were useless. Think. Analyze. What is he? Liquid. Colloidal suspension. Molecules held together by a quirk factor. Everything has a frequency. The slime covered his mouth. Izuku's vision began to spot. Everything vibrates. If I can match his resonant frequency, he couldn't use his voice. He was gagged. The wrists. Izuku stopped struggling. He let his arms hang limp in the sludge. The villain laughed, a bubbling, horrific sound. That's it, give up. Izuku flexed his forearms. From the ports on his wrists, 2 long, tendril-like jacks shot out. They didn't aim for the villain's eyes or mouth. They burrowed deep into the main mass of the fluid. Connect. Izuku closed his eyes. He could feel the villain's molecular structure. It was chaotic, a messy soup of bonds. Find the tone. He sent a low-frequency pulse through his wrist jacks. The villain paused. What? What are you doing? Too low. Higher. Izuku ramped up the frequency. The sludge began to ripple. The villain shuddered. Stop. That tickles. Stop it. Getting closer. 400 hertz. 500 hertz. Izuku gritted his teeth. He poured his stamina into the jacks. He turned his own bones into tuning forks. 800 hertz. The sludge started to boil. Not from heat, but from cavitation. Tiny bubbles formed within the liquid as the sound waves tore the fluid apart. Gah! What is this? The villain screamed. The grip on Izuku's mouth loosened. Izuku took a gasp of air. Resonance. Izuku choked out, his voice rasping. Cascade. He unleashed everything. He didn't scream with his throat. He screamed with his arms. A high-pitched, piercing whine erupted from his wrist jacks, amplified directly into the villain's body. It was the sonic equivalent of a blender. The effect was instantaneous. The bonds holding the sludge together shattered. Splat! The villain exploded. Not in a fiery burst, but in a physics-defying splash. The sludge lost all cohesion, turning from a sentient monster into a rain of harmless, dirty water. It plastered the walls, the ceiling, and the floor. Izuku fell to his hands and knees, gasping. His wrists smoked slightly from the friction. His ears were ringing, a high, sharp tone that masked everything else. He wiped the slime from his face, trembling. Target, neutralized. Holy. Texas. Smash. The voice was deep, booming, and sounded like safety. Izuku looked up, blinking slime from his eyes. Standing at the mouth of the tunnel was a mountain of a man. Blonde hair standing up in two distinctive tufts. A smile that defied the gloom of the underpass. He was holding a plastic grocery bag, and he looked utterly bewildered. All Might? Izuku wheezed. All Might stared at the scene. He looked at the sludge coating the entirety of the tunnel walls. He looked at the boy, skinny, trembling, with strange jacks hanging from his wrists and ears, kneeling in the center of the carnage. All Might started, then cleared his throat, stepping into the tunnel. I was pursuing this villain. I lost him in the sewer system. I arrived just in time to, he gestured to the splattered remains of the villain. To see that you didn't need me at all. Izuku stared. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by the crushing weight of exhaustion. The sensory filters in his brain were offline. The sound of All Might's footsteps was thunderous. The dripping of the sludge was deafening. He was fluid, Izuku mumbled, reaching for his headphones on the ground, desperate to put them back on. I just separated him. All Might watched the boy frantically jamming the headphones over his ears. The symbol of peace's smile faltered, just for a fraction of a second, replaced by a look of sharp, analytical interest. Young man, All Might said, his voice softer now. Are you injured? Izuku shook his head, standing up on shaky legs. He looked at his idol. He wanted to ask for an autograph. He wanted to ask a million questions. But his head was splitting open. I'm fine, Izuku lied. I should go. The police, they'll need to collect him. He pointed to the puddles of villain that were slowly trying to ooze back together, though they seemed unable to hold a form. All Might produced 2 empty soda bottles from his grocery bag. Indeed. I shall contain him before he recovers his equilibrium. But wait, Izuku was already walking away, stumbling slightly. Sorry. Too loud. It's too loud. He ran. He didn't know why, but he ran. He needed to be home. He needed the soundproof walls of his bedroom. He needed the silence. He didn't tell his mother about the villain. She would worry. She would cry, and her crying was a frequency that broke his heart. He sat in his room, the lights off, staring at the ceiling. His All Might posters were shadowy outlines in the dark. I defeated a villain, he thought. I used my quirk, and I won. But it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a loss of control. If he had used a slightly higher frequency, he could have liquefied the villain's eyes. If he had used a lower one, he might have collapsed the tunnel on top of himself. Dangerous. That's what people always said. Izuku is too loud. Izuku breaks things. He looked at his notebook on the desk. Hero analysis. Could someone who hurt the world just by existing really be a hero? A knock on the window startled him. Izuku froze. He lived on the second floor of the apartment complex. Tap. 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 He pulled one side of his headphones back. He listened, breathing. Heavy, labored breathing. The sound of steam escaping a pressurized valve. A heartbeat that was struggling. Thump, pause, thump. Izuku walked to the window and opened the curtains. Standing on the narrow railing of the balcony, clinging to the frame, was a skeletal figure. Blonde, messy hair. Sunken eyes. He looked like a stiff breeze would snap him in half, but Izuku recognized the frequency of the heartbeat. He had heard it only hours ago, thundering like a drum. Now, it was a dying bird. Izuku opened the window. All Might? The skeleton man coughed, blood spraying from his lips. Ah. You have good ears, young man. He climbed inside, collapsing onto Izuku's desk chair. A cloud of steam poofed away, leaving the emaciated man gasping for air. I am All Might, the man wheezed, wiping his mouth. Or, what's left of him. Izuku stood paralyzed. The gross form? True form, All Might corrected, lifting his shirt. Izuku gasped. The scar on the man's side was a crater. The tissue was gnarled and purple. To Izuku's ears, the sound of blood struggling to move through that damaged tissue was horrifyingly clear. 5 years ago, All Might said. A villain did this. My respiratory system is destroyed. My stomach is gone. I can only do hero work for about 3 hours a day. The rest of the time, I am this. Why? Izuku whispered. Why are you showing me this? All Might looked at him. His blue eyes, sunken in shadow, burned with intensity. Because I saw what you did in that tunnel, All Might said. And I followed you. I saw the way you moved. You didn't punch him. You didn't blast him with heat or ice. You took him apart, scientifically. I panicked, Izuku admitted, looking at the floor. I matched his vibration. Precision, All Might said. Most people with power like yours, they become wrecking balls. I watched the security footage from your neighborhood. The windows you broke as a child? The sonic booms? Izuku flinched. I know. I'm a hazard. No, All Might said firmly. He stood up, shaky but tall. You are a tuning fork. You have a power that could level a city block, yet you used it to separate a liquid suspension without cracking the sewer walls. Do you have any idea how difficult that is? Izuku blinked. I have to be careful. Because everything is so loud. Exactly, All Might said. He pointed a bony finger at Izuku. You live in a world of noise, yet you found clarity. I've been looking for a successor, young man. Someone who understands that power isn't just about output. It's about responsibility. Izuku's heart hammered against his ribs. Successor? Wait, Izuku said, raising his hands. Successor? You mean, taking your spot? I mean inheriting my power, All Might said. But... He paused, looking at Izuku's wrists, then at his ears. He seemed to reconsider. But looking at you now, I wonder if that is the right path. Izuku felt a cold drop in his stomach. Oh. Because I'm weird? No, All Might smiled gently. Because you are already full. Your vessel is overflowing. If I gave you my power, one for all, it might destroy you. Your body is already vibrating at a frequency that pushes human limits. Izuku looked down at his hands. So, I can't be like you. You can't be me, All Might said. And thank goodness for that. The world doesn't need another puncher. It has plenty. All Might walked over and placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder. The hand was light, frail, but the weight of it was immense. I saw a boy who saved himself when no one else could, All Might said. I saw a boy who lives in constant pain from the world's noise, yet refuses to shut it out completely because he wants to be a hero. You don't need my power, young man. You need to master your own. Izuku's eyes welled up. The tears came hot and fast. Can I? Izuku's voice broke. Can I still be a hero? Even if I'm not typical? Even if I have to wear headphones? Even if I scare people? All Might grinned, and for a moment, the shadow of the symbol of peace overlaid the skeleton. Heroes come in all frequencies, young Midoriya. Some are loud. Some are quiet. You! All Might tapped one of Izuku's ear jacks. You are the resonance that will shake the villains to their core. I believe you can be a hero. A magnificent one. Izuku fell to his knees, burying his face in his hands, and sobbed. It was a loud, ugly sob. But for once, he didn't care who heard it. 10 months later, the UA entrance exam. The entrance to UA High was crowded. Hundreds of students swarmed the gates, a sea of black uniforms and colorful quirks. Izuku stood at the gate, adjusting his gear. He wore a tracksuit, but his accessories were what drew the eye. He wore new headphones, sleeker, tighter, with a metallic finish. Thick, padded bracers covered his forearms, protecting the ports on his wrists. He carried a small tuning fork in his pocket, a habit he had picked up during his training with All Might. Training, Izuku thought with a grimace. It hadn't been the clean the beach montage he expected. It had been physics lessons. It had been meditation. It had been All Might taking him to abandoned warehouses and making him identify objects inside purely by echolocation. Don't look, Midoriya! Listen! Is it a crate or a barrel? What's the density? Izuku took a deep breath. He could hear the exam orientation starting in the auditorium miles away. He could hear the hum of the giant robots waiting in the mock city. Out of my way, Deku. Izuku didn't flinch. He knew Bakugo was there before he spoke. He had heard the specific cadence of his footsteps, heavy on the heel, aggressive. Good morning, Kaken, Izuku said calmly, not turning around. Bakugo stopped beside him. He looked Izuku up and down. He sneered at the arm bracers. You bring toys to a fight? Bakugo scoffed. Safety equipment, Izuku corrected. For everyone else's sake. Bakugo narrowed his eyes. Don't think this changes anything. I'm still going to crush you. I'm getting the top score. Probably, Izuku said. He turned to look at Bakugo, his green eyes calm behind a pair of yellow-tinted goggles he had pulled down from his forehead. You're very good at breaking things, Kaken. But I'm not here to break things. Ha! Then what are you here for? Izuku tapped his ear jack. I'm here to listen. He walked through the gate, leaving Bakugo confused and irritated. The practical exam, Battle Center B. The mock city was massive. Skyscrapers of concrete and glass towered over the streets. Izuku stood in the crowd of examinees. He saw a girl with brown hair looking nervous, heartbeat 120 BPM. He saw a tall boy with glasses doing stretches, joints popping, stiff cartilage. Start! Present Mick's voice boomed over the loudspeakers. Even with the dampeners, it was loud. The other students hesitated. Izuku didn't. He didn't run. He dropped to one knee and slammed both hands onto the pavement. Jack in. The tendrils from his wrist shot out, piercing the asphalt. Seismic sense. The world turned into a wireframe grid in his mind. The vibrations of the earth told him everything. 3 one-pointers turning the corner on 4th Street. 2 two-pointers on the roof of the bank. 1 3-pointer crashing through a wall 2 blocks east. Target acquired, Izuku whispered. He retracted the jacks and launched himself forward. He wasn't fast in the way Ida was fast. He moved with burst propulsion. He pointed his wrist jacks behind him and fired a concentrated pulse of compressed air, a sonic boom in miniature. Thwump. He rocketed forward, skimming the ground. A one-pointer robot rolled into view, its camera eye glowing red. Target located. Izuku didn't slow down. As he closed the distance, his ear jacks whipped forward like prehensile cobras. They extended, stretching 3 meters, 5 meters. Base cannon, single point. The tips of the jacks hovered inches from the robot's chassis. Scree. A focused beam of high-frequency sound slammed into the metal. It didn't dent the robot. It shattered the molecular lattice of the steel. The robot's chest plate crumbled into dust, and the internal circuitry sparked and died. Izuku vaulted over the wreckage without breaking stride. 6 points, he counted. He turned the corner. 3 two-pointers, the Scorpions, were surrounding a student, a boy with a laser navel who looked terrified. Izuku skidded to a halt. He couldn't shoot them all individually. They were too spread out. Area of effect required. Limit output to 15%. He clapped his hands together, weaving his wrist jacks into a complex knot in front of him. Stereo smasher. He thrust his hands forward. A visible wall of distortion rippled through the air. The sound was a deep, guttural wub-wub that shook the windows of the nearby buildings. The three robots were hit by the wall of sound. They were lifted off the ground, thrown backward as if hit by a tidal wave. They smashed into the building facade, crumpled into scrap metal. The laser boy stared, mouth open. Merci? Izuku was already gone. 10 minutes later, Izuku stood on top of a traffic light. He was panting. His ears were ringing slightly, a warning sign. He had 45 points. It was a solid score. I need to conserve stamina, he thought. My head is starting to throb. The ground began to shake. Not a vibration from a footstep. An earthquake. The other students in the street stopped. What is that? Someone screamed. From the center of the city, the 0-pointer rose. It was titanic. It blocked out the sun. Its treads crushed buildings like cardboard boxes. The sheer volume of it was agonizing. The grinding of gears was like a drill in Izuku's brain. He clutched his head, dropping to his knees on the traffic light. Too loud, too loud. The students turned and ran. Run! It's the gimmick! It's huge! Izuku prepared to flee. It was illogical to fight it. It was worth 0 points. Ow! A small sound. A cry of pain. Izuku froze. His filters picked it out from the chaos. Female. Distress. Under rubble. Distance, 40 meters. He looked down. In the path of the 0-pointer, the brown-haired girl was trapped. Her leg was pinned under a slab of concrete. The robot was looming over her. Izuku looked at the other students running away. He looked at the girl. His body moved before his brain gave permission. He leaped from the traffic light, using a sonic burst to propel himself toward her. He landed beside her, the impact cracking the pavement. Can you move? He shouted over the roar of the robot. It's stuck! She cried, tears in her eyes. I can't lift it. Izuku looked at the slab. It weighed at least 2 tons. He wasn't super strong physically. He couldn't lift it. He looked up. The 0-pointer's massive metal hand was descending. It was going to crush them both. He didn't have time to cut the robot apart. It was too big. If I can't move the rock, and I can't stop the robot, I have to move the ground. Cover your ears! Izuku screamed. Do it now! The girl, terrified by the intensity in his voice, slammed her hands over her ears. Izuku ripped his bracers off. He tore his headphones off and threw them aside. He needed 0 inhibition. He needed raw, unfiltered power. He slammed all 4 jacks, wrists and ears, deep into the road. Maximum output, he growled, blood beginning to trickle from his nose. Technique. Liquefaction. He didn't project sound into the air. He projected it into the earth. He found the resonant frequency of the soil, the concrete, the bedrock beneath them. Vibrate. The sound wasn't audible. It was felt. It was a localized earthquake of terrifying precision. The ground beneath the 0-pointer didn't crack. It turned to liquid. The solid asphalt behaved like quicksand. The massive robot, suddenly losing its footing, lurched. Its treads sank deep into the churning earth. Its center of gravity shifted. With a groan of twisting metal that could be heard for miles, the 0-pointer fell. Not forward but backward, away from the liquefied zone. Crash. The impact shook the entire testing ground. Dust billowed like a mushroom cloud. Izuku held the vibration for 3 more seconds, ensuring the robot was swallowed up to its waist in the street. Then he yanked his jacks free. The ground instantly solidified again as the vibration ceased. Silence returned. Izuku swayed. The world was spinning. He looked down at the girl. She was staring at him, eyes wide, unharmed. Are you? Izuku mumbled, his voice sounding distant to his own ears. Are you okay? He didn't hear her answer. His vision went white. Overload, he whispered, and collapsed face first onto the pavement. The viewing room, the room of pro heroes, was silent. On the screen, the massive 0-pointer lay half buried in the street, defeated not by brute strength, but by physics. He liquefied the ground, Midnight whispered. He turned the street into a swamp. The control required to do that without hurting the girl. Cementos noted, leaning forward. That's pro-level precision. He has a destructive quirk, Vlad King grunted. But he used it for rescue. In the back of the room, All Might smiled. He looked up the file in his hand. Izuku Midoriya. I told you, All Might whispered to himself. He's not a puncher. He's the resonance. The hospital room possessed a specific auditory texture that Izuku Midoriya loathed. It wasn't the volume. Hospitals were generally quiet places, but the quality of the silence. It was a pressurized silence, punctuated by the rhythmic beeping of cardiac monitors, the squeak of rubber soles on linoleum in the hallway, and the low-frequency hum of the ventilation system that rattled slightly in the ductwork above his bed. To anyone else, the room was peaceful. To Izuku, it was a cacophony of electrical currents and mechanical failures waiting to happen. He lay in the bed, staring at the white ceiling tiles. His head felt like it had been stuffed with cotton, yet his ears were ringing with a high-pitched whine, a phantom sound left over from the overload at the exam. Permanent damage? No. Not yet. The voice was croaky, old, and sounded like dry leaves scraping together. Recovery girl. Izuku turned his head slowly. The movement made the fluid in his inner ear slosh loudly, a wave crashing against the shore inside his skull. But you are treading a fine line, Sonny, the small, elderly hero said, climbing down from a stool after checking his chart. Your eardrums are reinforced, yes. They have a tensile strength closer to Kevlar than human tissue. But your auditory nerves? The connection to the brain? Those are still biological. You overload those, and you won't just go deaf. You'll scramble your equilibrium permanently. You'll be unable to walk in a straight line for the rest of your life. Izuku winced, his hand instinctively going to his ear. It was bandaged. I had to stop the robot. It was heavy. You liquefied the bedrock, Recovery girl sighed, shaking her head. Do you have any idea the amount of vibrational energy required to change the state of matter of silicate rocks? You turned yourself into a human earthquake. It's a miracle you didn't liquefy your own bones in the process. I used the jacks on my wrists as the primary output, Izuku murmured, his voice sounding muffled to himself. I tried to keep the resonance away from my torso. Smart, she conceded. But reckless. You passed out from sensory shock. Your brain simply couldn't process the input anymore, so it shut down. It's a safety breaker. She handed him a glass of water. The ice cubes clinked against the glass, a sharp, piercing tink-tink that made Izuku squint. You need better gear, she stated flatly. And you need to learn that volume isn't the only way to win. If you keep redlining your engine, you'll burn out before graduation. Graduation. Izuku took the water. Did I? Do you think I passed? Recovery girl gave him a gummy smile. I'm just a nurse, dear. I don't grade the exams. But I haven't seen someone drop a 0-pointer like that since, well, in a long time. The week following the exam was an exercise in agonizing stillness. For most students, the anxiety came from the uncertainty of their score. For Izuku, the anxiety was physical. His quirk, acoustic overdrive, was like a muscle that had been stretched too far and was now twitching as it knit back together. He spent the days in his room, the curtains drawn, wearing his heavy-duty noise-canceling headphones. He didn't play music. He played white noise, static, rain sounds, the drone of a fan. It helped mask the erratic sounds of the city outside. But he didn't just sit. He trained. All Might's words echoed in his mind. You are a tuning fork. You have a power that could level a city block, yet you used it to separate a liquid suspension. Precision. That was the key. On Tuesday, Izuku sat at his desk. In front of him was a complex, heavy-duty padlock he had bought from a hardware store. He didn't have the key. He placed his hands on the desk. From the ports on his wrists, the long, flesh-colored jacks snaked out. They were about a meter long, fully extended, tipped with headphone-like jacks that could morph and harden. He inserted the tip of the right jack into the keyhole. Feel the pins. He closed his eyes. He sent a low-level pulse through the jack. It wasn't sound. It was tactile vibration. He could feel the internal mechanism of the lock as if he were inside it. Pin 1. Spring tension high. Pin 2. Binding. He vibrated the tip of his jack at 20 Hz. The metal pin inside the lock shivered and jumped. Click. 1, he whispered. He moved to the next pin. This was his training. Not bench pressing trucks, but learning to whisper to metal. If he could control his vibration enough to pick a lock, maybe he wouldn't shatter windows every time he got startled. Click. Click. The lock sprang open. Izuku exhaled, wiping sweat from his forehead. It was mentally exhausting. It required a level of focus that shut out everything else. On Thursday, he went to the Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. It was clean now, thanks in part to his earlier efforts and the city finally taking notice. But there were still scraps of junk. He found a steel pipe, rusted and thick. He held it in his left hand. He extended his right ear jack, the long lobe stretching down like a tentacle. He wrapped the tip around the pipe. Vibroblade concept, he muttered. Frequency, 15,000 Hz. Amplitude low, he concentrated. The jack began to hum. It was a sound on the edge of human hearing, a mosquito whine that made his teeth ache. He pressed the vibrating jack against the steel pipe. It didn't cut like a knife. It eroded the metal. The friction heat caused the rust to flake away, and then the steel itself began to separate. It was slow, agonizingly slow, but the jack sank into the metal. Scree! Sparks flew. Izuku gritted his teeth, holding the frequency steady. If he wavered, the jack would bounce off. If he went too high, the jack would overheat and burn him. After 10 minutes, the pipe fell in 2 pieces. The cup was rough, jagged, and glowing red-hot. Izuku retracted the jack, blowing on the scorched tip. Sloppy, he critiqued himself. Kyoka Jiro, the girl on the news with the similar quirk, she uses hers like a whip. I need to be able to use mine like a scalpel. The arrival. The letter arrived on a rainy evening. The rain was loud. Thousands of drops hitting the roof created a drumming pattern that made it hard to think. Izuku was helping his mother with dinner, chopping carrots in time with the rhythm of the rain to drown it out. Izuku! Inko called from the entryway. It's here! The letter from Ue. The knife stopped. Izuku walked into the living room. The envelope was heavy. It felt dense, like there was something more than paper inside. He took it to his room. He sat at his desk, staring at it. This is it. The threshold. He tore the seal. A metal disc slid out, clattering onto the desk. BZZT. A holographic projection sprang to life. I am here. Izuku frantically scrambled for the volume dial on his headphones. Too loud. Too loud. All Might's face filled the projection, beaming with an intensity that seemed to bypass the visual and vibrate the air itself. As a projection. All Might bellowed. Young Midoriya. It has been a week. I apologize for the silence, but there was much red tape to cut through. You see, I am coming to this town to work at UA. Izuku blinked. He knew this. All Might had told him, but seeing it confirmed was different. You performed admirably in the written exam. All Might continued, unaware of the volume. But the practical. The practical. You destroyed robots worth 45 points. A respectable score. But that is not all. The screen shifted. A video clip played. It was the girl. The brown-haired girl from the exam, Uraraka. She was standing in a negotiation room, speaking to present mic. Excuse me? That boy, the one with the headphone jacks? He saved me. He destroyed that huge robot to save me. I want to give him some of my points. Izuku's breath hitched. You can't give him points, young listener. Present Mike said on the recording. But the sentiment is acknowledged. All Might returned to the screen. A hero course that rejects those who save others is no hero course at all. All Might declared, striking a pose. You risked everything. You sacrificed your own safety and sensory well-being to protect a stranger. And for that, the scoreboard appeared. Izuku Midoriya, villain points, 45, rescue points, 60, total, 105, rescue points. All Might shouted. A panel of judges watches, young man. And they were moved. 60 points for a magnificent save. You passed with flying colors. In fact, you ranked first in the exam. Izuku stared at the number. First. Come, young Midoriya, All Might said, reaching a hand toward the camera. This is your Hero Academia. The hologram faded. Izuku sat in the silence of his room. The rain outside didn't seem so loud anymore. I did it, he whispered. and for the first time in a week, the knot in his chest loosened. April, the first day. UA High School was a fortress of glass and steel. It was also, unfortunately, a fortress of noise. The hallways echoed. The sheer volume of students, hundreds of them, each with unique quirks, created a chaotic soundscape. There was a guy whose skin was made of stone grinding against his clothes. There was a girl who seemed to be invisible but whose footsteps were surprisingly heavy. Izuku navigated the halls, his new uniform stiff and uncomfortable. He wore his headphones around his neck, opting for discreet, high-fidelity earplugs instead. They dampened the noise by 20 decibels, enough to function, but allowing him to hear if someone spoke to him. He found the door. 1A. It was massive. Here we go. He slid the door open. Get your feet off the desk. The voice was mechanical, precise, and loud. Ha! The response was an explosion of arrogance. Izuku froze. Of course. Tenya Ida was standing over Katsuki Bakugo's desk, chopping his hands in the air. Bakugo was reclining, smirking, his feet resting on the sacred UA property. It is disrespectful to the upperclassmen and the makers of this desk. Ida shouted. They really put us in the same class, Izuku muttered, stepping inside. Bakugo's head snapped toward him. The red eyes narrowed. Deku. The room went quiet. Ida turned, adjusting his glasses. Ah. You are. Ida marched over. Midoriya. The one who figured out the structure of the practical exam. I am Tenya Ida from Semi-Private Academy. I didn't figure anything out, Izuku stammered, waving his hands. I just acted. You perceived the true nature of the test, Ida insisted. I misjudged you entirely. I hate to admit it, but you were the better candidate. Oh. It's the messy-haired boy, a cheerful voice came from behind. Izuku turned to see the brown-haired girl, beaming. You made it. She cheered, bouncing slightly. That punch, that earthquake thing, was amazing. I'm Ochako Uraraka. Izuku Midoriya, he introduced himself, smiling. Her voice was pleasant. It had a round, warm frequency. Unlike Bakugo's jagged, sharp tone, or Ida's square, rigid one. If you're here to make friends, pack up and leave. The voice came from the floor. The class froze. Lying in a yellow sleeping bag, looking like a discarded caterpillar, was a man with tired eyes and messy black hair. It took you 8 seconds to quiet down, the man said, unzipping the bag and standing up. He looked exhausted. Time is limited. You kids aren't rational enough. He pulled a gym uniform out of his sleeping bag. I'm your homeroom teacher, Shota Aizawa. Put these on and meet me on the grounds. The locker room. The boys' locker room was a flurry of activity. Izuku changed quickly, keeping his back turned. He was self-conscious about the scars on his arms, tiny, white lines from years of practicing with his jacks, and the fresh bruising on his wrists from the entrance exam. Hey man, a boy with red spiky hair said, grinning. I'm Kirishima. That trick you did at the exam? My buddy in the other arena saw the dust cloud. Said it looked like a building collapsed. What's your quirk? It's complex, Izuku said, pulling on his gym shirt. Sound manipulation mostly. Sound? A boy with blonde hair and a black lightning bolt streak leaned in. Kaminari. Like Jiro in the girls' locker room? She's got earphone jacks too. Izuku paused. Jiro? Yeah, Kyoka Jiro. Punk rock vibes. You guys related? No, Izuku said. I don't think so, but he was curious. Another acoustic quirk user? They were rare. The assessment grounds. The class gathered on the dirt field. The sun was bright, and the wind carried the scent of cherry blossoms and ozone. Izuku scanned the group. He found her immediately. Kyoka Jiro. She was standing near the back, twirling one of her earphone jacks around her finger. She had short, dark purple hair and an air of effortless cool. But Izuku saw, or rather, heard more. He heard her heart rate, slightly elevated. 90 BPM. She was nervous. She looked up and caught him staring. Her eyes dropped to his ears. Then to his wrists. Her eyes widened. She had 2 jacks. He had 4. She frowned slightly, a look of confusion and defensiveness. She crossed her arms, tucking her jacks away. A quirk apprehension test? The class shouted in unison. What about the ceremony? The guidance counselor? Uraraka asked. If you want to be a hero, you don't have time for such leisurely events, Aizawa deadpanned. UA's selling point is freedom of style. That applies to the teachers as well. He held up a softball. Bakugo, you finished first in the entrance exam. How far could you throw a softball in middle school? 67 meters, Bakugo grunted. Try it with your quirk. Bakugo stepped into the circle. He grinned, stretching his shoulder. Die! Boom! The explosion was deafening at close range. Izuku flinched, his hands flying to his ears despite the earplugs. 705.2 meters, Aizawa read from his device. The class gasped. Awesome! We can use our quirks? This looks like fun. Aizawa's expression darkened. Fun? You have 3 years to become heroes. You think it's going to be all fun and games? He smiled, a terrifying, shark-like expression. Right. The one with the lowest score across all 8 events will be judged as having no potential, and will be expelled. The silence that followed was absolute. Event 1 50-meter dash. Izuku watched Ida run. 3.04 seconds. The sound of his engines was like a jet turbine. Then it was his turn. He was up against the small boy with purple balls on his head. Ready. Izuku didn't crouch in a sprinter's stance. He stood with his back to the finish line, looking over his shoulder. Start! Izuku threw his arms back. From his wrists, the jack shot out, biting into the track surface behind him like grappling hooks. Retract! The jacks contracted violently. Izuku was yanked backward, which was forward toward the finish line, flying through the air feet first. Mid-air, he shot his ear jacks downward, slamming them into the track to vault himself again, like a spider skipping across water. It was chaotic, terrifying to watch, and incredibly fast. He crossed the line. 5.51 seconds, the robot announced. Not Ida's speed, but faster than normal running. He retracted his jacks, panting. He looked over at Jiro. She was staring at him, mouth slightly open. She had run a 7.1, using her jacks to push off the starting blocks, but she didn't have the tensile strength to slingshot her entire body weight like he did. Event 2, grip strength. Izuku took the dynamometer. He wrapped his wrist jacks around the handle, layering them over his fingers. Contract. The jacks tightened like a boa constrictor. The machine groaned. 160 kilograms. Shoji, the multi-armed boy, got 540 kilograms. But 160 was respectable. Event 3, standing long jump. Izuku stood at the line. He channeled sound into the soles of his shoes, creating a cushion of compressed air. Blast. He launched himself. A small sonic boom kicked up dust. He cleared the sandbox entirely. Event 5, ball throw. This was it. The main event. Uraraka got infinity. The class lost their minds. Izuku stepped into the circle. He held the ball. He knew his score was okay so far, but not top tier. He needed a standout performance. He looked at Aizawa. The teacher was watching him like a hawk. He expects me to break my bones, Izuku realized. He saw the entrance exam footage. Izuku took a deep breath. Frequency check. Pitch check. He wound up his arm. He wasn't going to throw it with muscle. He activated his quirk. Red lines veered up his arm. The air around the ball began to warp. Whirr. Smash. Izuku yelled, whipping his arm forward. At the moment of release, he opened the ports on his palm, a secondary feature of the wrist jacks, and unleashed a concentrated, directed sonic boom directly behind the ball. Pop. The ball didn't move. It dropped to the ground, rolling 3 feet. What? Izuku blinked. The sound had vanished. The energy had dissipated. He looked at Aizawa. The teacher's hair was floating. His eyes were glowing red. I erased your quirk, Aizawa said, his voice dry. That entrance exam, you were reckless. If you use that level of power again, you'll incapacitate yourself. I don't have time to teach someone who is a liability. Izuku stammered. I wasn't going to go 100%. I was aiming for. You can't control it, Aizawa cut him off. Your quirk is sound. Sound is chaotic. It reflects, it echoes. Unless you have absolute mastery, You're just a walking bomb. Are you going to shatter your own eardrums every time you save someone? Izuku clenched his fists. The doubt. The same doubt he had felt for years. Too loud. Too dangerous. But he had trained. He had picked locks. He had cut steel. I'm not a bomb, Izuku said, his voice trembling but firm. I'm a tuner. Aizawa blinked, his eyes returning to normal. Then prove it. You have one more throw. Izuku picked up the ball. He thinks I have to use maximum volume for distance. He's wrong. Izuku turned away from the field. He faced the back wall. What's he doing? Kaminari asked. He's facing the wrong way. Izuku extended his wrist jacks. He plugged them into the ground, anchoring himself. Then, he extended his ear jacks. He didn't aim them at the field. He aimed them at the ball in his hand. He tossed the ball into the air. As it fell, Izuku spun. He whipped his ear jacks around. They moved so fast they blurred. He didn't hit the ball with the jacks. He created a slipstream. A vortex of sound. Acoustic cannon, rifled barrel. He caught the ball in the center of the sonic vortex generated between his two ear jacks. The sound waves spiraled, creating a tunnel of pressure. Boom! The ball shot out of the vortex like a railgun round. It didn't just fly, it screamed through the air, breaking the sound barrier instantly. A visible cone of vapor formed around it. It soared. And soared. It vanished into the sky. Aizawa looked at his device. His eyebrows shot up. He turned the screen to the class. 905.3 meters. He beat Bakugo. Someone shouted. Izuku stood panting. His ears were ringing, but they weren't bleeding. He hadn't used a wide-area blast. He had focused the sound into a narrow beam, preserving energy and sparing his surroundings. He looked at Aizawa. I can still hear you, Sensei. Aizawa grinned. It was a creepy, genuine grin. Good. DKU. An explosion of heat and rage. Bakugo launched himself from the crowd. What the hell was that? Since when can you do that? You've been hiding this extra power all this time? He was fast. He was going to blast Izuku in the face. Izuku didn't move. He didn't have to. Scarf. Aizawa's capture tape wrapped around Bakugo, restraining him instantly. Don't make me use my quirk so much, Aizawa muttered. I have dry eye. He dropped Bakugo. We're wasting time. Next, the ranking. The sun was setting. The test was over. Izuku stood with the class, exhausted. His head was pounding. He needed silence. He needed a dark room. The results, Aizawa said, projecting a hologram. Izuku scanned the list. 1. Momo Yaoyorozu. 2. Shoto Todoroki. 3. Katsuki Bakugo. 4. Tenya Ida. 5. Izuku Midoriya. 20. Minoru Mineta. He wasn't last. He was fifth. His physical scores were average, but his quirk-assisted scores were elite. By the way, Aizawa said, turning to leave, the expulsion was a logical ruse. It was to draw out your potential. Way out? The class screamed. Yaoyorozu sighed. Of course it was. It was obvious. Izuku slumped with relief. As the class began to disperse, packing up their bags, Izuku felt a presence beside him. He turned. Kyoka Jiro was standing there. She had her hands in her pockets, kicking at the dirt. She looked conflicted. Hey, she said. Her voice was low, raspy. A cool alto. Hi, Izuku said, adjusting his headphones. So, she started, not making eye contact. You have an emitter quirk. Earphone jack based. Yeah, Izuku said. Acoustic overdrive. That's what I call it. Jiro looked at his earlobes. They were thicker than hers, more muscular. And he had the wrist ports. It's strong, she admitted, sounding a bit bitter. You got 900 meters. I only got 200 using my heartbeat amplification. Izuku sensed the frequency of her insecurity. It was a dissonant chord. She felt redundant. Yours is better, Izuku blurted out. Jiro blinked, looking at him. Ha! You just blew a hole in the sky. I just play bass. No, Izuku said, shaking his head. He pulled a notebook out of his bag. Hero analysis. He flipped to a fresh page where he had already started sketching her. I watched you during the grip test and the sidesteps, Izuku said, his voice speeding up into Famba mutter mode. Your jacks are way more flexible than mine. Mine are stiff, like cables. Yours are like whips. You have way more fine motor control. And your hearing range? I saw you flinch when Hagakure sneezed 3 lanes over. Your passive reception is cleaner than mine. I have to filter everything out with tech or I go crazy. You seem to be able to isolate frequencies naturally. He pointed to her jacks. I'm a cannon, Izuka said seriously. You're a scalpel. In a hostage situation? Or spy work? I'd be useless. I'd bring the building down. You could hear a pin drop in a panic room. That's really cool. Jiro stared at him. Her cheeks turned a shade of pink. She twirled her jack nervously. She had expected arrogance. She had expected him to look down on the weaker version of his quirk. Instead, he had dissected her abilities and found the value she hadn't even fully realized herself. You're a nerd, she said, but there was no bite in it. She smiled, a small, genuine smirk. I guess so, Izuka laughed, scratching the back of his head. I'm Jiro, she said, extending one of her ear jacks instead of her hand. Izuka hesitated, then extended his own ear jack. The tips touched. Tap. A tiny static shock passed between them. A connection. Midoriya, he said. Don't think this means I won't beat you, Midoriya, she said, retracting her jack. I just have to get louder. I think, Izuka said, putting his noise-canceling headphones back over his ears as they walked toward the exit, that you sound just fine. She rolled her eyes, but the smile stayed. Behind them, watching from the shadows of the school entrance, Bakugo kicked a pebble into dust. TCH. Tuner, Bakugo mocked, mimicking Izuka's words. I'll break him. But for the first time, the explosion in his palms felt small compared to the boom that had rung out across the field. The hum of the world was changing. And Class 1A was starting to find its rhythm. The reputation of Izuka Midoriya had arrived in Class 1A before he had even spoken a word to most of them. It was a reputation built on a single, cataclysmic event, the crushing of the 0-pointer. To the students who had been in Battle Center B, the memory was visceral. It wasn't just a visual memory of a robot falling, it was an auditory memory. It was the sound of the earth liquefying, a deep, resonant groan that had vibrated in their chests for hours afterward. They looked at the green-haired boy not as a classmate, but as a walking natural disaster. Izuku, for his part, was trying very hard to be invisible. It was the morning of the second day. The homeroom period had passed with Aizawa sleeping in the corner, and now it was time for foundational hero studies. Izuku sat at his desk, his noise-canceling headphones resting around his neck. He was currently using his secondary filters, custom-molded earplugs that dampened ambient noise by 15 decibels. It was enough to stop the scratching of pencils from sounding like chisels on stone, but it didn't stop the whispers. That's him, right? The guy who sank the robot. He looks so quiet. I heard he made Aizawa-sensei's hair float yesterday. Izuku stared at his notebook. Hero analysis for the future number 14. He was sketching a diagram of his own ear jacks, trying to calculate the tensile strength limit he had hit during the quirk assessment. Midoriya-chan? The voice was close. Wet. Frog-like. Izuku flinched, looking up. A girl with large eyes and a bow-shaped mouth was standing there. Tsuyu Adri. Oh. Hi, Izuku stammered. I speak my mind, she said bluntly, placing a finger on her chin. Your quirk. It's like Jiro-chan's, isn't it? But scarier. Izuku blinked. Scarier? Jiro-chan makes sounds, Adri said. You make earthquakes. Are you sure you're in the right class? You seem like you'd be better at demolition than rescue. It wasn't an insult, just an observation, but it stung. Izuku looked down at his hands. I'm working on the volume knob. I don't want to break things. Good, as you said. Because you're sitting next to me, and I have sensitive ears. Before Izuku could apologize, the door to the classroom burst open. I am here! The shout was thunderous. Izuku jammed his headphones over his ears instantly, wincing. Coming through the door like a normal person, All Might marched into the room, wearing his Silver Age costume. His cape fluttered in a wind that didn't exist. He posed at the podium, his smile blinding. Foundational Hero Studies. All Might bellowed. For this class, we'll be building your hero foundation through various trials. Let's jump right in with this. He held up a card with the word battle emblazoned on it. The trial of battle. The class erupted in excitement. Bakugo's grin turned feral. And to go with your first battle. All Might pressed a button on a remote. The wall of the classroom hissed open, revealing numbered suitcases. We have prepared the gear you sent in requests for to match your quirks. Costumes. The class cheered. Izuku looked at case number 18. He felt a surge of nervous energy. He had spent weeks designing his suit. It wasn't just for looks. It was a containment unit. It was a silencer. Get changed and meet me at ground beta. All Might commanded. Remember, from today on, you are heroes. Ground beta, the locker room. The changing room was a chaotic mix of fabric, plastic, and excitement. Whoa, Midoriya, check this out. Kirishima shouted, hardening his arm to test his jagged shoulder pads. My gear is super manly, right? It looks great, Kirishima-kun, Izuku said, opening his case. He pulled out his suit. It was primarily dark teal and black, colors chosen to blend into shadows. The material was a thick, padded synthetic weave designed to absorb vibration. He pulled on the pants. They had heavy shock absorbers built into the knees and shins to dampen the impact of his landings. The boots were thick-soled, made of a specialized rubber that prevented him from accidentally conducting sound into the floor when he walked. But the most important parts were the gauntlets and the headgear. The gauntlets were bulky, covering his forearms entirely. They had ports that aligned with his wrist jacks, allowing him to plug in and channel his sound through amplifiers or suppressors built into the armor. He pulled the mask on. It covered the lower half of his face with a metal respirator-like device, designed to filter his voice if he accidentally screamed. Finally, the headset. It was a masterpiece of support engineering, a sleek, armored helmet with high-fidelity auditory sensors that gave him 360-degree awareness while protecting his eardrums from his own blasts. He stepped out of the locker room and into the tunnel leading to ground beta. The light hit him. Looking good, Deku. Uraraka waved at him. She was wearing a tight pink and black suit. I should have been more specific with my design, she laughed nervously, scratching her cheek. It's a bit skin-tight. Izuku blushed, the heat rising in his cheeks. It looks great. Very aerodynamic. Whoa, Kaminari said, walking up to Izuku. You look like a walking speaker system, dude. Are those subs on your arms? Sort of, Izuku explained, tapping the gauntlets. They're directional emitters. They let me aim the sound so I don't hit allies. Midoriya. Izuku turned. Kyoka Jiro was standing there. Her costume was punk rock chic, leather jacket, torn shirt, and speakers on her boots. But she was staring at his helmet. That's a lot of insulation, she noted, her jacks hovering near his headgear. I need it, Izuku admitted. My output. It hurts me if I'm not careful. Jiro nodded, a look of understanding in her eyes. Resonance feedback. I get that when I plug into concrete sometimes. Your skull feels like it's vibrating apart. Exactly, Izuku smiled beneath his mask. It's nice to have someone who understands the physics of it. Hey! Tuner! The peaceful moment shattered. Bakugo stomped over. His costume was a testament to violence. Massive grenade gauntlets, heavy boots, and an explosion of jagged black fabric behind his head. You got a lot of fancy gear for a pebble, Bakugo snarled. Hope that helmet is crash-proof. It is, Izuku said calmly. Specifically rated for concussive force. Bakugo twitched. He hated Izuku's calmness. He hated the way Izuku didn't flinch anymore. The zero-pointer incident had changed the nerd. He wasn't the scared kid from middle school. He was a guy holding a loaded gun, trying not to pull the trigger. We'll see, Bakugo spat. All Might cleared his throat. Excellent. You all look cool. Now, shall we begin? He explained the rules. Indoor battles. Villains protecting a nuclear weapon, papier-mâché, heroes trying to touch it or capture the villains. Teams will be decided by lots. Izuku watched the box shake. He prayed. Please not Kaken. Please not Kaken. Team A. All Might announced. Izuku Midoriya and Ochako Uraraka. Yes. Uraraka cheered, high-fiving the air. We're a team, Deku-kun. Team D. All Might continued. Katsuki Bakugo and Tenya Ida. Izuku froze. The universe, it seemed, had a cruel sense of humor. First matchup. All Might reached into 2 boxes. Team A will be the heroes. Team D will be the villains, the class murmured. The rivalry between Bakugo and Midoriya was already palpable. This is gonna be ugly, Shiro whispered to Kirishima. Bakugo looks like he wants to murder him. Midoriya broke a robot the size of a building, Kirishima countered. I'm more worried about the building, the setup. Bakugo and Ida entered the building first to set up. Inside the monitor room, the class watched the screens. Midoriya is shaking, Ashido pointed out. On the screen, Izuku was standing outside the building, trembling. But Uraraka was patting his back. It's not fear, Jiro said softly, watching the monitor. Huh? Kaminari looked at her. Look at his hands, Jiro pointed. He's not shaking from fear. He's tuning. He does that when he's trying to find the resonant frequency of the area. He's vibrating his own bones to calibrate his echolocation. Inside the simulation area, Izuku took a deep breath. The air smelled of dust and concrete. Uraraka-san, Izuku said, his voice distorted slightly by his mask. Kaken, he's going to come for me. He won't care about the bomb. He wants to prove he's better than me. So we split up? Uraraka asked. No, Izuku shook his head. That's what he wants. He wants a duel. But this is a team battle. We win by capturing the weapon. He tapped his helmet. I'm going to turn off the lights. What? I can see in the dark, Izuku said. Or, well, here in the dark. If we cut the power, Ida and Kaken will be blind. I'm not. Can you do that? There's a breaker box on the exterior, Izuku said, pointing to a gray metal box on the wall near the entrance. I can fuse the circuits from here. Start. All Might's voice boomed over the speakers. Izuku didn't waste a second. He aimed his right wrist jack at the breaker box. High frequency, short circuit. ZZZZZT. A concentrated beam of sound hit the metal box. The vibration loosened the wires inside, causing them to touch. Sparks flew, and with a loud clunk, the hum of the building's electricity died. The lights inside the 5-story concrete structure flickered and went out. Inside the building, what the hell? Bakugo shouted. The hallway was plunged into pitch darkness. The only light came from the faint glow of the exit signs, casting eerie green shadows. A power outage? Ida's voice echoed from the weapon room on the 5th floor. Is this part of the simulation? It's that damn nerd, Bakugo growled. Sparks popped in his palms, providing brief flashes of illumination. He's trying to hide. Bakugo grinned in the dark. Hiding won't help you, Deku. I'll blow this whole building apart until I find you. He abandoned the weapon room. Stay here, Four Eyes. I'm going hunting, Bakugo. Stick to the plan. Ida yelled, but Bakugo was already stomping down the stairs. 2nd floor hallway. Izuku and Uraraka moved through the darkness. For Uraraka, it was terrifying. She had to hold onto Izuku's arm to keep from tripping. For Izuku, the world was a map of blue wireframes. Every footstep Bakugo took on the floor above sent a pulse through the concrete. Izuku could see him, a glowing red avatar of rage stomping down the stairwell. He's coming, Izuku whispered. North stairwell. He's angry. Heartbeat is 140. Respiration is fast. What do we do? Uraraka whispered back. We ambush him, Izuku said. I'll take the hit. You float him. Right. The heavy footsteps grew louder. Clomp. 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 DKU. Bakugo screamed. I know you're here. Bakugo rounded the corner. He couldn't see anything. He raised his gauntlet, preparing to fire a blast blindly down the hall. Now! Izuku shouted. Izuku didn't fire a sonic blast. He clapped his hands together. Sonic stun, flash bang. It wasn't a blast of force. It was a blast of pure, disorienting noise. A screeching, high-pitched wail that mimicked the feedback of a microphone, amplified 100 times. GAH. Bakugo roared, clutching his ears. The sound scrambled his equilibrium. He stumbled, firing his explosion into the ceiling instead of down the hall. Boom! Debris rained down. Izuku lunged out of the smoke. He didn't punch. He wrapped his wrist jacks around Bakugo's grenade gauntlet. Uraraka! Uraraka dove out from behind Izuku, slapping her hand onto Bakugo's chest. Float! Bakugo became weightless. His feet left the ground. He flailed, trying to right himself, but without gravity, his inner ear, already scrambled by Izuku's sonic attack, couldn't tell up from down. He began to spin in midair. You bastard! Bakugo screamed, firing explosions backward to propel himself. He ricocheted off the walls like a pinball. Go! Izuku yelled to Uraraka. I'll hold him here. Get the weapon! Uraraka nodded and ran for the stairs. Izuku stood alone in the dark hallway with a floating, furious Bakugo. You think this is a fight? Bakugo roared, bouncing off the ceiling and orienting himself toward Izuku using the sound of his voice. You think turning off the lights makes you better than me? Bakugo placed his hands behind him. A massive explosion propelled him forward like a missile. Stun grenade! A blinding flash of light lit up the hallway. Bakugo used his explosion not just for speed, but to blind Izuku's night vision. It worked. Izuku squeezed his eyes shut. But he didn't need eyes. Air pressure. Incoming object. Velocity high. Izuku dropped into a crouch. He aimed his gauntlets at the floor. Base jump. He fired a pulse into the floor, launching himself upward just as Bakugo flew underneath him. As Izuku flipped over Bakugo in midair, he extended his jacks. Capture wire! The jacks wrapped around Bakugo's midsection. Izuku landed on the wall, using his boots to stick briefly, and yanked. Bakugo slammed into the concrete floor. Damn it! Bakugo coughed. He grabbed the jacks wrapped around him. Gotcha! Small explosions popped along his palms. Crack, crack, crack. Pain shot up Izuku's arms. It felt like burning wires were being dragged through his veins. Let go! Izuku yelled, retracting the jacks violently. He fell from the wall, landing in a crouch. Bakugo stood up. He was floating, but he had managed to grab a pipe on the wall to anchor himself. You're always analyzing, Bakugo sneered, his face illuminated by the sparking of his palms. You think you can calculate your way out of a beatdown. But you forget one thing, Deku. Bakugo pulled the pin on his grenade gauntlet. I don't need to hit you. I just need to fill the room with fire. Izuku's eyes widened behind his mask. Kaken! No! In this enclosed space, that blast will die. Bakugo fired. It wasn't a normal explosion. It was a tunnel of flame. It consumed the hallway. The heat was instantaneous. Izuku didn't have time to dodge. Wall of sound. Defensive barrier. Izuku planted his feet. He crossed his arms in front of his chest. All four jacks, ears and wrists, pointed forward. Acoustic shield, nullification, he screamed. He matched the roar of the explosion with his own voice, and he pumped an inverse frequency out of his gauntlets. The fire met the wall of sound. The explosion mushroomed, expanding outward but unable to penetrate the sonic bubble Izuku had created. The heat was intense. Izuku felt his skin blistering. His throat felt like he was swallowing razor blades. But he held the line. The fire dissipated, leaving the hallway scorched and smoking. Bakugo stared. He was panting, hanging onto the pipe. You blocked it? Izuku fell to one knee. His costume was singed. His mask was cracked. I told you, Izuku rasped, his voice raw. I'm not a pebble anymore. The weapon room. Uraraka reached the 5th floor. Ida-kun! She shouted, bursting into the room. Ida was standing by the weapon. He had cleared the room of all furniture to prevent Uraraka from having ammo. Uraraka-kun! Ida laughed, adopting a villainous pose. I, the master villain, knew you would come alone. Bakugo is dealing with your partner. Deku is holding him off. Uraraka said. I'm taking that weapon, she charged. Ida was fast. Recipro burst. He moved like a blur, grabbing the weapon and moving it to the other side of the room. Too slow. Uraraka skidded to a halt. I can't catch him. And there's no debris to float. Suddenly, the floor beneath them shuddered. Rumble. What is that? Ida paused. Through the earpiece, Uraraka heard Izuku's voice. It was weak, strained. Uraraka-san, pillar, southeast corner. Deku? I'm sending a pulse through the structure. Get ready. Down on the second floor, Izuku was plugging his jacks into the main support column of the building. He was bleeding from his ears. The strain of blocking Bakugo's blast had taken a toll. Just a little shake, Izuku whispered. Resonance transfer. He sent a vibration up the pillar. Not enough to collapse the building, but enough to rattle the fifth floor violently. In the weapon room, the floor suddenly jumped. Whoa! Ida lost his balance. The vibration threw off his engine torque. He stumbled. Now! Uraraka shouted. She didn't run for the weapon. She ran for the pillar. She hugged it. Home run comet! She floated herself, then pushed off the vibrating pillar. The kinetic energy from Izuku's pulse transferred into her weightless body. She shot across the room like a bullet. Ida tried to intercept, but he was still regaining his footing. Uraraka flew past him. She wrapped her arms around the papier-mâché bomb. Captured. No! Ida cried, falling to his knees. My villainy! The aftermath. Hero team wins! All Might's voice announced. The lights in the building flickered back on, backup generators kicked in. Down on the second floor, Bakugo stared at the ceiling. He had heard the announcement. He looked at Izuku. Izuku was slumped against the wall, breathing heavily. He had retracted his jacks. He looked small again. You used me, Bakugo whispered. You kept me down here, so Round Face could get the win. I couldn't beat you in a fight, Kaken, Izuku admitted, pulling off his cracked mask. His face was pale, sweat-drenched. Your combat sense, your reflexes, they're amazing. If I tried to knock you out, I would have had to use the level of power that broke the robot. And that would have killed you. Bakugo froze. So I just distracted you, Izuku finished. Bakugo's hands shook. It wasn't anger this time. It was the crushing realization of the gap. Izuku hadn't fought to win the brawl. He had fought to win the war, and he had held back the zero-pointer power because he viewed Bakugo as someone to be saved, not destroyed. Don't look down on me, Bakugo hissed, but there was no heat in it. He turned and walked away. The monitor room. The class was silent as Izuku and the others returned. Izuku walked in, holding his side. Recovery girl bots had already patched up the minor burns, but he was exhausted. That was... Kirishima started. That was manly as hell, Midoriya. You blocked the explosion with your voice. Kaminari shouted. Dude, that was metal. All Might stood at the front. Well done! MVP for this battle is young Ida. Eh? Uraraka blinked. Why Ida? Ida embraced the role best, as Yui said, tapping her chin. Bakugo ran off like a crazy person. Midoriya destroyed the building's electrical grid and damaged public property. Uraraka giggled while floating. Ida was the only one playing the game properly. Correct. All Might gave a thumbs up. Izuku smiled sheepishly. He looked over at Bakugo, who was standing in the corner, fuming silently. Then, he felt a tap on his shoulder. It was Jiro. She pointed to his ear jacks. They were red and irritated. You pushed it, she said sternly. You were off-key at the end. I could hear your pitch wavering. Yeah, Izuku admitted. Blocking that blast took everything I had. You need to learn to modulate, Jiro said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small bottle of oil. Here. It's clove oil and saline. Good for the jacks when they get dry or burned. My dad uses it. Izuku took the bottle. Thanks, Jiro-san. And... She looked away, twirling her jack. That blackout move? Using echolocation to hunt? That was pretty scary. In a good way. I learned it from observing bats, Izuku said. Well, Jiro smirked. Next time, maybe warn us before you blow out the fuse box. My amps barely survived the surge. Sorry, Izuku laughed. He looked around the room. The fear from the zero-pointer incident was still there, lingering in the way Mineta hid behind Shoji when Izuku looked at him. But there was respect now, too. He wasn't just a natural disaster. He was a tactician. He was a tuner, and as he looked at All Might, who gave him a subtle nod, Izuku realized something. He didn't need to be the loudest person in the room to be heard. He just needed to find the right frequency. The morning commute was a daily war against the decibel. For the average citizen, The Tokyo train system was a mundane inconvenience of crushing bodies and stale air. For Izuku Midoriya, it was an acoustic torture chamber. The screech of metal wheels on tracks registered as a dentist's drill against his molars. The hum of the electric overhead lines was a persistent mosquito whine, and the people, hundreds of distinct heartbeats, rustling fabrics, tapping fingers, and whispered conversations, created a wall of white noise that threatened to drown him. Izuku stood in the corner of the train car, pressing his back against the cool metal wall. He wore his heavy-duty noise-canceling headphones, the Mark IVs he had tinkered with over the weekend. They were bulky, encompassing his entire ear and the prehensile jacks that hung from his lobes, sealing him in a bubble of relative silence. He closed his eyes, focusing on the rhythmic thump-thump of his own heart. Control, he told himself. Filter. The battle trial 2 days ago had changed things. He wasn't just a nervous kid with the weird headphones anymore. He was the guy who had blocked an explosion with a scream. He was the guy who had turned off the lights and hunted Bakugo like a bat in a cave. The train rattled over a junction. Izuku winced, the vibration traveling up his spine. Midoriya-kun! The voice cut through his digital filters. It was loud, projecting from the diaphragm with proper posture. Izuku opened his eyes. Tenya Ida was standing there, holding a strap, looking stiff and formal as always. Beside him, Ochako Uraraka offered a sympathetic smile. Izuku pulled one headphone cup back slightly, breaking the seal. The noise rushed in, but he focused on them. Good morning, Ida-kun, Uraraka-san, Izuku said, his voice soft. Your gear, Ida noted, gesturing to the headphones. Is it functioning optimally? After the thermal stress of the battle trial, I worried the circuitry might be compromised. I replaced the outer shell, Izuku explained. Kaken's blast melted the plastic, but the drivers were okay. I actually upgraded the dampeners. I need to be careful not to, listen too hard. It must be exhausting, Uraraka said, swaying slightly as the train banked. Having a quirk that's always on. Like, I can just stop touching things to stop floating them. But you can't stop hearing. I can tune it out, Izuku said. But it takes focus. It's like, imagine you're in a room with 10 TVs on different channels. Usually, I can turn the volume down on 9 of them. But when I get stressed, or surprised, the volume on all 10 goes to maximum. That sounds nightmarish, Ida said gravely. Truly, the burden of a hero takes many forms. The train slowed for the station. As the doors hissed open, the rush of the platform hit them. Izuku quickly sealed his headphones back over his ears, his jacks twitching reflexively against his neck. Let's go, he murmured. UA is quiet. The walls are thick. Class 1A, the morning after. The atmosphere in Class 1A had shifted. On the first day, there had been curiosity. Now, there was a heavy, respectful wariness. When Izuku slid the door open, the chatter died down for a fraction of a second before resuming. It was a subtle dip in volume, but Izuku noticed it. He walked to his desk. As he sat, he felt eyes on him. Minoru Mineta, the small boy with the great balls, leaned away as Izuku passed. Don't vibrate me, man, he whispered to himself. Hey, Midoriya. Jiro Kirishima turned around in his seat, grinning with sharp teeth. That move with the blackout? Seriously manly. Terrifying, but manly. You totally shut Bakugo down. I didn't shut him down, Izuku corrected, pulling his notebook out. I just managed the damage. If that fight had gone on for 2 more minutes, my costume would have failed, and he would have roasted me. Still, Hantashiro chimed in from across the aisle. You stood up to him. And you saw the replay of the blast deflection? You created a sound vacuum. That's some high-level physics. Physics is all I have, Izuku shrugged. I'm not super strong like All Might. I have to be a nerd about it. Across the room, Kyoka Jiro was sitting at her desk, twirling one of her jacks around a pencil. She wasn't looking at Izuku, but her earphone jack was pointed directly at him, subtly stretching across the gap between their desks. She was listening. He calls it physics, she thought. To me, it's just feeling. She felt a strange knot in her stomach. Ever since the quirk assessment, where he had launched a ball into the stratosphere with a sonic cannon, she had felt redundant. Her quirk was earphone jack. His quirk was acoustic overdrive. It felt like she was the demo version, and he was the premium release. Class is starting, Aizawa's voice droned from the doorway. He didn't shout, but the class silenced instantly. He walked to the podium. Good work on yesterday's battle trial. I saw the video feeds and went over each of your results. His eyes landed on Bakugo. Bakugo. You're talented. So stop acting like a kid having a tantrum. Bakugo glared at his desk, his jaw tight. I know. And Midoriya, Aizawa continued. Izuku straightened up. You broke your costume again, Aizawa said tiredly. But you kept property damage to the building minimal, considering the scale of the attacks. Your situational awareness is your greatest asset. Don't lose it by over-relying on brute force output. Yes, sensei, Izuku nodded. Now Aizawa sighed onto homeroom business. Sorry to spring this on you, but today you need to pick a class representative. The tension broke. The class erupted. Pick me! I want to be leader! Kirishima shouted. My agency will be full of girls. Mineta drooled. I believe my style is best suited for governance. Aoyama struck a pose. The noise was instantaneous and piercing. Izuku winced, his hands flying to his headphones to dial up the suppression. It was chaos. Quiet down! Ida shouted, standing up and chopping his hand. His booming voice cut through the din. This is a serious responsibility. Leading a group like this requires the trust of those around you. We should put it to a vote. A vote? Tsuyu Aji asked. But we haven't known each other long enough to trust anyone. That's why whoever gets the votes is the true leader. Ida insisted. The vote was held. Izuku stared at his ballot. He didn't want the job. Being class rep meant standing in front of people. It meant shouting over crowds. It meant being the focal point of the noise. He looked at Ida. The guy was rigid, loud, and obsessive, but he had organized the chaos earlier instantly. Izuku wrote Tenya Ida. When the results were tallied on the blackboard, the class gasped. Izuku Midoriya 3 votes. Momo Yaoyorozu 2 votes. Tenya Ida 1 vote. Wait, who voted for Ida? Izuku stared at the board. 3 votes? Who voted for the human subwoofer? Bakugo growled. I did. Uraraka raised her hand unapologetically. He's cool under pressure. He's smart, Sato added. He figured out the robots and the building structure. Izuku walked to the front of the class, trembling. He stood next to Yaoyorozu. Izuku tapped the microphone on the podium nervously. It screeched with feedback. He flinched. I'm not sure I'm the right frequency for this. Just breathe, Midoriya, Yaoyorozu whispered kindly. The cafeteria, white noise. Lunch at Yue was famous for the food, courtesy of the cook hero, Lunch Rush. But for Izuku, the cafeteria was the hardest part of the day. It was a cavernous hall filled with hundreds of students, clattering trays, metal utensils scraping on ceramic, and the low roar of conversation. The acoustics were terrible, high ceilings that created echoes upon echoes. Izuku sat at a table with Uraraka and Ida. He had taken his helmet off but kept his smaller, in-ear plugs in. I can't believe I got elected, Izuku sighed, poking at his rice. Ida-kun, you should have gotten it. You wanted it more. Desire alone does not make a leader, Ida said, adjusting his glasses. You garnered the trust of the class. I merely shouted. You shouted effectively, though, Izuku pointed out. So, Midoriya, Uraraka chewed her rice. Can you hear everything in here? Like right now? Izuku looked around. If I focus? Yes. I can hear the third years arguing about internship drafts 3 tables over. I can hear Lunch Rush chopping onions in the kitchen. I can hear the ventilation fan in the northeast corner has a loose screw. That's incredible, Ida marveled. It is ultimate surveillance. It's ultimate headache, Izuku corrected. It's like trying to read a book while someone shines a strobe light in your eyes. I have to constantly build mental walls. Suddenly, a siren blared. Whoop. 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 Security Level 3 breach. All students please evacuate in an orderly fashion. The cafeteria exploded into panic. Chairs scraped violently against the floor. Students screamed. The stampede began. What's Level 3? Uraraka yelled over the noise. It means someone breached the school grounds. Ida shouted. The crowd surged toward the exit. Izuku was jostled, slammed against Ida. The noise was unbearable. Screaming. Crying. The thudding of hundreds of feet. Stop pushing! We're gonna die! Villains! Izuku clutched his head. The dampeners weren't enough. The sheer volume of panic was overwhelming his senses. He felt the vibrations in the floor, too erratic, too chaotic. Focus. What is it? Is it a villain? He forced himself to listen past the screams. He extended his sensory range, pushing his awareness through the walls, out toward the main gate. He heard clicking. Shutter clicks. He heard shouting, but not threats. Questions. Give us a comment on All Might. Is he teaching here? Look at the camera. Reporters, Izuku gasped. He looked at the crushing mass of students. They were going to trample each other. Someone was going to get hurt. It's just the media. Izuku shouted, but his voice was lost in the roar. He looked at Ida. Ida was being crushed against the glass window, trying to yell, but failing to be heard. Izuku grabbed Ida's arm. He pointed at the exit sign above the door. Ida? Throw me. What? Throw me. I need to get above the noise. Ida didn't hesitate. He grabbed Izuku by the back of his uniform. Engine boost. Ida spun and hurled Izuku into the air. Izuku soared over the heads of the panicked students. As he reached the apex of his arc, near the high ceiling, he slammed his hands together. He didn't use a sonic blast. He used amplification. He extended the jacks from his wrists, and plugged them into the auxiliary ports on his own throat. A feature of his biology he rarely used because it felt invasive. It turned his vocal cords into a biological PA system. Everyone! Stop! The voice didn't just fill the room. It resonated in the chest of every single student. It was a command frequency, deep and authoritative. The stampede froze. The silence was instant. Izuku hung in the air for a second before landing gracefully on top of the exit sign archway. He stood there, looking down at the crowd. It's just the media, Izuku announced, his amplified voice clear and crisp, reaching every corner of the cafeteria without shouting. There are no villains. It's just reporters who got through the gate. Look out the windows. It's just cameras. The students turned. They saw the press swarm outside. The panic evaporated, replaced by relief and embarrassment. You're okay, Izuku said, dialing down the volume. Please walk. Don't run. It's too loud when you run. The students laughed nervously. Order was restored. Ida looked up at Izuku, awe on his face. Midoriya-kun. Izuku slumped against the wall above the door, unplugging his wrist jacks from his neck, coughing. His throat burned. I hate public speaking, he thought. The physics of sound. Later that afternoon, during a free study period, the class was buzzing about the cafeteria incident. Izuku had officially resigned as class rep, handing the position to Ida. You were the one who threw me, Izuku had argued. And you organized the evacuation line. I just turned up the volume. Now, Izuku was sitting at his desk, tinkering with his gauntlet. He had a small screwdriver and was adjusting the tension on his wrist port. Midoriya-san? Izuku looked up. Momo Yaoyorozu stood there, holding a textbook. Beside her was Denki Kaminari, looking confused but interested. Hey Yaoyorozu-san. Kaminari-kun, I was hoping to ask you a question about your quirk mechanics, Momo said politely. During the battle trial, and today at the cafeteria, you seem to understand wave dynamics on an intuitive level. I was struggling with this concept in our physics homework regarding destructive interference. Oh. Izuku's eyes lit up. Destructive interference is basically my defense mechanism. Like with Kaken's explosion, he grabbed a notebook. See, sound is a pressure wave. It has peaks and troughs. If an incoming wave, like an explosion's shockwave, hits me, I analyze its frequency. Then I emit a counterwave, the exact inverse. He drew a sine wave, then drew another one directly mirroring it. When the peak of the explosion meets the trough of my sound, they cancel out to zero. Theoretically. In practice, it's messy because explosions are broadband noise, not a single tone, so I have to emit a white noise barrier that covers the whole spectrum. Whoa, Kaminari blinked. So you're basically noise-canceling headphones for the world? Exactly. Izuku pointed at him. That's exactly what I am. Active noise cancellation. But the energy requirement, Momo frowned. To cancel an explosion of that magnitude, you must produce an equal amount of energy. How does your body sustain that? It doesn't, Izuku admitted, pulling down his collar to reveal a faint bruising pattern on his neck and shoulders. The recoil vibrates my internal organs. If I do it too much, I risk internal hemorrhaging. It's why I have to be a glass cannon. I can output huge power, but I have zero durability against the kickback. So you're vibrating yourself apart, Kaminari grimaced. Dude, that's metal, but also, yikes! From 3 desks away, Jiro listened. She wasn't looking at them. She was staring at her phone, scrolling through a music playlist. But she heard every word. He calculates it, she thought. Sine waves. Broadband noise. Recoil. She looked at her own jacks. She had always just played. She felt the rhythm of the world and joined in. She used her heart. Midoriya used his brain. Is that why he's stronger? She wondered. Because he treats it like a weapon, and I treat it like a song? She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. Jiro? Kaminari called out. Going to practice, she muttered, grabbing her bag. Need to clear my head. Izuku watched her go. He heard the dissonance in her footsteps. The music room. UA High School spared no expense on its facilities. The music wing was soundproofed, acoustically perfect, and stocked with top-tier instruments. Jiro sat alone in practice room 3. She had her bass guitar plugged into a massive amplifier stack. But she wasn't playing with her hands. She had her earphone jacks plugged directly into the guitar's input jack. She closed her eyes and sent a pulse of her heartbeat into the instrument. Thump thump. The amp shuddered with a low, distorted bass note. Thump thump. It was powerful. It could crack concrete. But it was simple. Just a beat. I need more range, she whispered to herself. He has range. He has cannons. I just have a pulse. She tried to force a higher frequency. She gritted her teeth, straining her jacks. Scree. Feedback whined. It hurt. She flinched, yanking the jacks out. Damn it. The door to the practice room creaked open. Jiro jumped, spinning around. Izuku stood there. He was holding his helmet under his arm. He looked nervous. Midoriya? Jiro frowned. Did you follow me? I heard you, Izuku said apologetically. I mean, not on purpose. But the low frequency, it travels through the floor. I was in the library downstairs and the table started shaking. Jiro blushed. Sorry. I was trying to push my output. Izuku stepped inside, closing the soundproof door. The silence in the room was heavy, deadened by the foam on the walls. You're trying to match my volume, Izuku said softly. It wasn't a question. Jiro looked away, crossing her arms. So what if I am? We have basically the same quirk, Midoriya. But you're taking down giant robots and I'm just scouting. It's frustrating. Izuku walked over to the drum kit in the corner. He sat down on the stool. You know, he said, picking up the sticks. I've always been jealous of your quirk. Jiro scoffed. Yeah, right. The guy who can level a building is jealous of the girl who can hear through walls. I can hear through walls too, Izuku said. But for me, it's like smashing through the wall with a sledgehammer. For you, it's like slipping a key under the door. He tapped the snare drum lightly. Tat tat. My quirk is a mutation of my mom's attraction quirk and my dad's fire breathing, Izuku explained. It's violent. It's forceful. My jacks are stiff. Look, he extended his ear jack. It moved rigidly, like a robotic arm or a thick tentacle. Yours are flexible, Izuku pointed to hers. They're like whips. They have finesse. You can steer them around corners. You can plug into tiny ports that I would crush. So you have power, I have control, Jiro summarized. Great. I'm the utility support. No, Izuku said. He looked at the amplifier she was using. You're the melody. I'm just the rhythm section. He stood up and walked over to her amp. Can I try something? He asked. Jiro hesitated, then nodded. Don't blow my amp. Izuku extended his wrist jack. I won't. I'm going to set my output to, let's say, 5%. He plugged into the auxiliary input of the amp. Jiro was still plugged into the main input. Play your heartbeat, Izuku said. Just the baseline. Jiro frowned, but she sent the pulse. Thump thump. The deep bass filled the room. Okay, Izuku said. Now, I'm going to add the treble. He closed his eyes. He vibrated his jack at a high frequency, a synthesized, electronic tone. Whoop whoop. The sound mixed with her heartbeat. The amp roared. It wasn't just noise anymore. It was a complex, layered soundscape. Her deep, organic rhythm grounded his sharp, synthetic oscillation. Whoa, Jiro whispered. The vibration in her jacks felt different. It felt supported. Do you feel that? Izuku asked, his eyes still closed. The resonance. When our frequencies overlap, the amplitude doubles without doubling the effort. It's constructive interference. Jiro closed her eyes too. She could feel Izuku's sound inside the amp. It was frantic, high energy, almost anxious. But when it hit her steady, rhythmic heartbeat, it smoothed out. She pushed back. She increased the tempo of her heart. Thump thump thump. Izuku matched her instantly. Wub wub wub. They weren't speaking. They were communicating through the vibration. Jiro led the tempo. Izuku provided the texture. The room began to shake. The sound waves were becoming visible, distorting the air around the amp. Higher! Jiro shouted, grinning. She felt a rush of adrenaline. She didn't feel weak. She felt essential. Push it! Izuku yelled back. They hit a crescendo. A massive, harmonized blast of sound that slammed into the soundproof walls. Boom! The amp sparked and died. Smoke curled from the inputs. Silence returned. Izuku and Jiro stood there, panting, their jacks still plugged into the fried piece of equipment. They looked at each other. Izuku burst out laughing. It was a genuine, loud laugh. Jiro started giggling. You owe me a new amp, Midoriya. Worth it. Izuku wiped sweat from his forehead. Did you feel that? The stereo effect. Stereo, Jiro tested the word. I like that. She retracted her jacks, winding them back around her ears. She looked at him, and the bitterness was gone. You're right, she said. You are loud. But you're kind of a mess without a baseline to keep you steady. I am, Izuku admitted. I'm all noise. Well, Jiro punched him lightly on the arm. Maybe we can jam again sometime. I can help you, tune it. I'd like that, Izuku smiled. Villain interlude, the static. While Izuku and Jiro were finding harmony, a discord was brewing in a dark bar across the city. Tamura Shigaraki scratched at his neck. The sound was dry and irritating. Scritch, scritch. The schedule is set, a misty figure Kurojiri said from behind the bar. All Might will be at the USJ facility tomorrow for rescue training. Good, Shigaraki rasped. Finally. We can kill the symbol of peace. He picked up a photo spread on the counter. It was a printout of Class 1A. His finger hovered over a face. Not Bakugo. Not Todoroki. He pointed to Izuku Midoriya. This one, Shigaraki hissed. The brat who hijacked the news feed today. Orderly fashion. He thinks he's a hero. Midoriya Izuku, Kurojiri supplied. Quirk, acoustic overdrive. High destructive potential. The data suggests he is sensitive to sensory overload. He's annoying, Shigaraki said, his red eyes narrowing. He's loud. I hate loud things. He tapped the photo, his finger decaying the paper where it touched Izuku's face. When we attack, make sure the Nomu screams, Shigaraki grinned. Let's see if we can break his eardrums before we break his spirit. The next day, the bus ride. Class 1A was on the bus, heading to the unforeseen simulation joint USJ. The mood was light. Izuku was sitting next to Jiro this time. They were discussing music genres. Izuku liked instrumental post-rock, no lyrics to distract him, while Jiro was obviously into punk. I say whatever comes to mind, Ajiri said from the seat ahead. Midoriya-chan. Yes, Ajiri-san? Izuku asked. Call me Tsuyu. Your quirk is a lot like All Might's. Huh? Izuku froze. W what? No. I mean, I create sound. He punches things. It's totally different. Wait, Tsuyu-chan, Kirishima interjected. All Might doesn't have earphone jacks. If anything, Midoriya is like present Mike, but cooler. I guessed, Tsuyu tapped her chin. But the way he moves. And the way he jumps. And the way he breaks himself. It reminds me of All Might. Izuku sweated nervously. She's too sharp. Well, his popularity is already climbing, Kaminari laughed. Did you see the forums? They're calling him soundbite or bass drop. Though Deku is kinda sticking too. I don't mind Deku, Izuku said quietly. It sounds different now. It doesn't sound like useless anymore. It sounds like, he looked at Jiro, like the start of a track she finished for him. The bus slowed down. We're here, Aizawa announced. Stop messing around. They looked out the window at the massive dome of the USJ. Izuku felt a shiver run down his spine. His jacks twitched violently against his neck. Something is wrong. He pulled one side of his headphones off. Midoriya? Uraraka asked. What is it? I hear. Izuku frowned, staring at the facility. I hear static. Like interference. Inside the dome, the lights flickered, and in the center of the plaza, a black vortex began to swirl. The hum of the world was about to turn into a scream.